Awesome. All right. Welcome, everyone. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking a deeper dive into fears. So last week we got a bunch of, we went through line by line, word for word, page by page. When I mentioned the name of the study that we did page by page, people were like, oh, that's so clever. I always just give Vivian credit because I didn't even notice the first week I was doing it. So we went through and we broke it down. And then what we did was we went through a couple of examples of fears. And we went through some of those. Now, we didn't have time to get through all of them, as we often don't, but Vivian had the suggestion, well, why don't we go through more next week? And why don't we keep going and doing examples? So that's what we're going to do today. I made sure to make a note of the ones that we didn't do last week, and we're going to go through those. And if you have any fears, bring them to mind, but not in an overwhelming way. Just, we'll put them in the chat and we'll go through them. Now, before we fully dive into the examples, I'm just going to do a very, very quick review on the 4 columns that I use for fears. So I'm going to bring up the share screen. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to use this 4-column inventory. And if you guys remember from a couple weeks ago when we were doing resentments, our piece of paper is set up quite similarly, where we have one line across the page horizontally, breaking it into top and into bottom, and then 2 lines from that line all the way up to the top, which gives us 3 columns at the top and 1 big column at the bottom. And the first column that we have is fear. Like, what is the fear? So fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear nobody will ever love me, fear of dying alone, fear of being in a relationship, fear of sex, fear of intimacy, fear of success, fear of failure, any of those, all of those. And we do 1 fear per page. So write the fear, flip the page, write the fear, flip the page. And where we get our fears, one is they can come from our heart, come from our mind, whatever's there is there. But a helpful place to get them is from our 4th column of resentments. Because we found that we had these fears underpinning each and every resentment that we had. So it makes sense. Hey, why don't I take those fears and I take them through the columns? Because if this is the fear that is active and alive and fueling these resentments, well, man, it makes sense I should get freedom from it. The second column is, why do I have this fear? What is the reasons, or what are the reasons I'm afraid of this? And, point form, we don't have to go into too detail. When we get all of our column 2s done, we then go and work and look at column 3. Now, column 3 is, how has self-reliance failed me? And this is why we're doing a lot of examples, is because at first it can be a little bit conceptually difficult. Everyone that I've ever worked with, this is one that most people have been like, man, wait, what does that look like? And we learn through examples, but I promise when you get the hang of it, when it clicks, you're like, man, I got it. And so when we look at how has self-reliance failed me, what we're looking at is, how has me playing God in my life, me relying on me, created this fear? Or how has me relying on me brought this fear into fruition? And we can always start with our most self-centered alcoholic day and move to the present tense. We then say the fear prayer, which is, God, remove my fear and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And we then look at, how can God reliance overcome this fear? Now, there's always 2 levels to this. There is the surface level, and the surface level is essentially where we take what we put in column 3 and we flip it and write how. So as we go through examples, it'll be more clear. But hey, if self-reliance has failed me in that, I'm drinking, I'm ruining my life, well, how can God reliance overcome this fear? I'm going to stay sober through the daily application of these 12 steps. Just as an example of how we flip it and write how. And that's the surface level. Now, the deeper level for each and every fear that we might have, other than fear of relapse, that's one that we don't have a deeper level for. Relapse is the quickest one to do. The deeper level is, even if even if that fear comes into fruition, even if that fear happens, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use this experience to help others. And that is powerful because it allows me to, that fear and that experience, man, it gives it purpose. And I joke that sometimes when I write inventory, I like to be a little hyperbolic. So write it to the nth degree of like, let's say it's fear of rejection. It's like fear that everybody on earth will reject me. And if I rely on God, I'll be okay. And I'll use this experience to help others. And they can reject me too. I'll take it to the nth degree. You don't have to write it like that, but that's just one way in which you can. And it's helpful. So for those that are interested, if you want, put some of your fears in the chat and I'll work through them as we go. So I have the ones from last week. So we had Social Security not being there when I retire. We had a fear of talking to our brother. So we're going to expand on that, like a fear of having a difficult conversation with a difficult person. We have not meeting a deadline. And goodness gracious, I hope that fear wasn't time sensitive and we missed that deadline. Whoops. I think that's funny. And then there's a fear of losing everything. So one by one, I'll take those fears through the columns. And if you have more fears you'd like to do, more fears you'd like to add, put it in the chat. We'll go through as many of them until we get there. So let's start with that fear of Social Security not being there. So what I would do is in column 1 right here is I would write fear, Social Security not being there. Why do I have this fear? Maybe I'm afraid about sort of the global economic situation, which is outside of my control. Maybe I'm afraid that I won't be cared for in my old age. I won't be cared for in retirement. Maybe I have this fear because I don't know if I'm going to be able to survive, in my retirement age, so those could be, why I have this fear. And so then let's have a look at how has self-reliance failed me in terms of this fear. So keep in mind, I am a Canadian, so if I do get some of the social insurance 401k sort of stuff wrong, I'm in a different country. I don't know all the words. And if you're wondering, do you know the ones for the country that you live in? No, no, I don't. I don't money very well. But let's have a look at how self-reliance has failed us. Now, I know this question came from somebody who's been sober a while, but it can sometimes be helpful to start with, well, how has self-reliance failed me? When I rely on self, I am active in my alcoholism. And when I'm active in my alcoholism, that is where my money goes. And it goes to booze. It goes to, living that lifestyle. And I'm not able to, I'm not able to hold down work. And maybe we're working in jobs where we are underemployed, jobs where we're just working so we can basically survive and continue to drink, but we're underemployed. We're not climbing the corporate ladder, as it were. So that could be an example of how self-reliance has failed me. We can also look at hey, when I am sober, have I been proactive in saving? So have I, on self-reliance, hey, even sober, have I been avoiding dealing with retirement and taxes and financial planning? Have I been putting that off? Have I been overwhelmed by it? Have I not asked for help in regards to this issue? We can also look at, hey, am I somebody who struggles with compulsive spending? I'm not saying that that's true in every case. I'm just trying to broad strokes on these fears. So if I'm spending, I can look at hey, I'm ultimately not treating the spiritual malady with the spiritual awakening with God, with deepening the experience. What's happening is I'm trying to spend away my feelings. I'm trying to comfort myself with buying. Maybe I'm somebody where I gotta keep up with the Joneses. I have an appearance, an ego, an image that I'm trying to create and I'm trying to keep, and that means I need an RV and an ATV and a fourth wheeler and all these things, and I'm spending so that I look a certain way. We can look at how has self-reliance failed us in terms of how do I show up at work? Do I show up at work angry, bitter, resentful, entitled? Or, am I showing up like barely? We can also look at, like, has self-reliance failed me? Am I staying in a job that isn't serving me? I'm the sort of person where I will stay in a place that is miserable because I am more comfy with the misery that I know than that fear of change. And so those are some examples of how self-reliance has failed us. Well, actually, we can also look at, hey, am I showing up to this situation with black and white, all or nothing thinking? I'm gonna have all the money or I'm gonna have none, and I'm approaching it through a very literally black, white, all, nothing sort of lens, which is exacerbating this fear. And we can also look at, like, hey, am I engaging in a lot of talk around it, but not a lot of constructive action? So I'm just throwing those things out there. And then we say the prayer. Listen, I'm Canadian. I'm gonna throw a please. God, please remove my fear and direct my fear of not having Social Security or not having retirement when I get older, and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And you don't have to say please, and you don't even have to throw the specific prayer or the specific fear in the prayer. I like to do that. You don't have to. So how can God reliance overcome this fear? Well, let's look at the first thing. Now, keep in mind, I have this document, and I'll make sure I put it in the chat after the study. It's 128 pages of examples of column 3 and column 4, because what happens is people would ask me for suggestions or ask me for help, and I would do voice to text. Because I will often say things and then immediately forget what I said. And so what happened is I kept doing the same things over and over. I'm like, why don't I just put this in a document? And that document got big. So we'll take the first thing and we'll flip it. So how can God reliance overcome this fear? Well, I'm going to stay sober. And the reason I'm going to stay sober is I'm working these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it because it does. And I'm going to be, of service to others. I'm going to be sponsoring prayer, meditation, making my amends. And as we talk about amends, I'm also going to make financial amends. And what that's going to do is that is going to change my relationship with money. So as I make my financial amends, I'm going to see that it's not my money, it's God's money. And as I make my financial amends, my relationship with finances is going to change. And I know this might seem counterintuitive for those that haven't made financial amends, but when I'm paying back the money, spoilers, they don't want my money, they would like their money back. But when I'm paying that money back, I begin to realize that I can operate from a place of abundance, that there's often more than I feel like there is. So I get that experience with finances. Also, as I sponsor and work with others, man, I'm going to work with a whole lot of people who have lived experience of financial insecurity, relationships and money. Those are the big ones we tend to be afraid of. And I'm going to see time and time again, firsthand as I work with others, how if they continue to do this work, things continue to work out financially. It's going to be okay. Now, that's one way. We're also going to have a daily prayer, daily meditation, daily evening review. And what that is going to do is that's going to help us have a look at, how do I phrase it? We're going to have a healthier baseline. We're going to be treating our spiritual malady. And we're going to do that through this daily application of the 12 steps. And as a result, we're going to be less likely to Amazon away our feelings or Temu away our feelings. And so we're going to be spending less. And if money is very troublesome, one of the things that I do when I work with sponsees, which is a beautiful tie into next week, is I often take areas of difficulty through the sex inventory columns. And from that, we cultivate a sane, sound ideal for our finances. And so we can cultivate a financial ideal that we take to prayer and to meditation on a daily basis, and that changes how we show up to money. Well, so as we work these 12 steps and we deepen our relationship with the God of our understanding, what happens is we actively and intentionally seek our sense of value and worth from God. And when that happens, I don't need to keep up with the Joneses. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to continue to spend money that I don't have, so I look a certain way. Those walls and masks can fall away, and I don't need to keep up appearances. Another thing is, hey, you know what we could do? Start putting money away for retirement. We could start doing it now. And I know that in many cases it's overwhelming, so we could also ask for help. Asking for help, putting money away, looking at maybe a 401k, looking at things that could be a responsible way to help prepare us for retirement. We could start now. And if we start now, we ask for help, we're reasonable, we're also less likely to grab a hold of like, hey, let's invest in something like super risky. You know what I mean? Like we can be more suited, more stable with it. We're also going to cultivate healthier relationships with the people around us. And we're going to do that even in our old age, even in our retirement, which is going to set us up for, hey, if we need help, there's going to be more people around. We're going to have a community. We're not going to be, living life on our own. But the deeper level is, even if there's no Social Security for me when I retire, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. And so that would be fear of Social Security not being there. And I just figured I'll switch it up and put the share screen down. Absolutely. Financial. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, when I have the screen up, I can't always see the chat. So yeah, we were doing essentially a fear of financial insecurity as it pertained to retirement. And some of those things that I said would hit the same nails for financial insecurity otherwise. And so the next one that we have is having a difficult conversation with a difficult person. Oh man, I relate to that. I don't like doing that. Ooh. So column 2, why do I have this fear? Oh, there's going to be conflict and it's going to be bad. And I know how it's going to go and it's going to be a pain in my butt. And I don't want to deal with it and I don't want to get yelled at and I don't want people to be mean to me and I don't like it. That's why it's painful, right? So we get that down, and then let's have a look at column 3. So how has self-reliance failed me in regards to having a difficult conversation with a difficult person? Well, I'll tell you what my natural instinct is. I'm gonna avoid it at all costs. I don't see it. It's not happening. I can't deal with it. So I will avoid it at all costs. And when I avoid it at all costs, welcome. There's 2 things that happen. One is the fear increases. So that little molehill of a conversation, that's getting a little mountainous. We're hitting like K2, we're hitting Everest. I'm making mountain references. And I was like, those are the only 2 that are coming. Kilimanjaro, we're hitting a Kilimanjaro, we're hitting I'm blanking on the one in Japan. But we're making a mountain out of it. And it becomes more and more overwhelming. So by not communicating, that fear increases. I know I spoke about black and white, all or nothing thinking with the other one, but we're going to see some themes. So I'm going to approach this difficult conversation with black and white, all or nothing thinking. It's going to be awful or I'm going to get my way. You know what I mean? And another thing that I find, Mount Fuji, thank you, super helpful. I'm operating on, we get what we get, and it's okay to get upset, but you got to write inventory on it. So I'll avoid the conversation. I'll view it through that lens of black and white, all or nothing thinking. I will view it through the lens of competition, that need to win, or through the lens of conflict, that it's going to be bad. Also, as I rely on self, I will also not engage in the 12 steps as a way of life. And I won't cultivate experience with having difficult conversations and letting go of the results. For example, step 5. For example, step 9. And believe it or not, when it comes to having difficult conversation, the 9th step preps me for it. But I'll also avoid sponsoring. I'll avoid working with others. I know that you guys can't relate to this ever, but your girl, she's a little bit codependent. So on my own, I need you to like me for me to be okay. You know what I mean? My perception of your opinion of me is the only thing that gives me value and worth. You'll notice it's not actually your opinion of me. It is my perception, and I am somebody that I will, and some of us do the other, so I'll give the other as well. I will contort myself, and I will be who you need me to be, and I will manage and control your feelings, perceptions, and emotions so that I avoid conflict at all costs. I know you guys can't relate to that. Nobody here can. Or some of us swing the other way. And we approach these difficult conversations with a hammer or a bat. We're just going to swing our way through so we get what we want. Now that's not really me, but that could be some of us. So I want to hit all of those things, right? And so a lot of times I'll approach difficult conversations with this less than who I am is not enough. Or this, I am better than you, I'm the less than, rather than I'm the better than. But I approach it in that way. And and I'm not saying this is in this case, but hey, have there been amends in this situation that maybe I should have made earlier that I'm avoiding? Maybe there's inventory around this person that I'm avoiding as well, like a resentment inventory. Those are things that could be helpful as well. But I'm not going to do those in column 3. So column 4. I'm going to say the prayer, and because I'm a Canadian, we're throwing in place. God, please remove my fear of having a difficult conversation with a difficult person. And please remove my fear of having a difficult conversation with a difficult person and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And then we get into that 4th column. Now, and so please bear with me. I don't always hit the bullets in order because I forget the order that I just said them in, which is why I have that 128-page document. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to practice communication, and we're going to do it early and often. And early and often is the key. For those of us who have sponsored others, and for those who are about to sponsor others or going to sponsor others, that's also something that's super helpful. You'll notice, and this is how working with others, sponsoring, helps us have difficult conversations. Because oftentimes I forget to say the thing until it feels like it's a big deal, as opposed to saying it from the get-go. You know what I'm saying? It's so much easier to address something right away than let it fester for several months or years or decades, and then try to bring it out. It's a little bit easier to deal with it in the moment. But here's also the thing. What we're going to do is we are going to treat communication as a practice. The lens with which we get that is we are practicing this way of life. So communication goes from being all or nothing, black or white, to it is a practice. And as I grow in these 12 steps, I grow in my ability to practice communication. Not to do it perfectly, not to do it right, but as a practice. And here's something else. And this is a real shift. And if you're wondering, I have written a lot of inventory on this sort of topic in particular. A lot. So I'm like, I got some stuff for this one. Really? You don't have a lot for the finances? Little Miss Budget based on vibes? Weird. No, I do. But this was a real shift for me. When I saw that I can view communication as cooperative and collaborative, rather than that competitive or that conflict. See, I'm approaching it through this win-lose, but I can show up through the lens of we are working together to find an answer that's going to work for both of us. That we are collaborative, open to hearing, to receiving. if that makes sense. Also, I'm going to be active in this daily program of action. So I'm praying, I'm meditating, I'm taking my evening review, I'm catching things imperfectly as they pop up in the 10th step. And what that is doing is that is giving me a more solid baseline, a more regulated nervous system as a medical technical sense, but I'm going to have this better spiritual baseline to have these difficult conversations. But also as I grow in these 12 steps, as I grow in this way of life, again, where is my value and worth coming from? It's coming from God. I'm praying, God, I pray that I would receive a sense of value and worth in you. I'm active and intentionally seeking that from God so I can channel that to others. And when I get it from God, I don't need to hustle it from you because I've got it from God. And you then don't have to like me. You know what I mean? I can tell when I'm off the beam, when I'm like, is he mad at me? Oh no, does she not like me anymore? I'm like, uh-oh, uh-oh. And I don't mean like I've done something. I mean, I'm just in my little noodle about it. You know, not that anyone can relate to that. And as I do this work, what happens is I grow in that experiential humility. I'm no better than you. I am no worse than you. And I am reliant on God. And that allows me to show up. We are equals. Because I'll show up like I'm at the principal's office and I'm in trouble, you know. And here's something too. As I become a healthier person through this work, through this way of life, the things that were once acceptable no longer are acceptable. What I mean by that is I begin to show up to life as somebody who is kind and compassionate and not being a big jerk. I start to attract healthier people, which guess what? That sets me up for some of those difficult conversations going a little bit better. And guess what? We have a lot of experience in these 12 steps, amends, sponsorship, with taking spiritual action, i.e. a difficult conversation and letting go of the results. So we have that experience of I will say and do the difficult thing, but the results, that's in God's hands. And I have a lived experience with that. And I can invite God into the conversation, God into the process, and let go of the results. And the deeper level is even if it goes bad, and the worst thing that happens, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. And as another thing that was coming to me as I was saying that is, I'll also show up with that lens of what can I give? How can I help? You know what I mean? That's a very different way of showing up. Even if it's going to be a difficult conversation, I can show up in that way. Absolutely. So then we have not meeting a deadline. So fear of, I'm not going to meet a deadline. And so we put that in column 1. So column 2, why do I have this fear that I'm not going to meet a deadline? Maybe the deadline is looming and we are not where we're supposed to be. Now, I don't know what the deadline is, but the deadline could be, something work related. And I'm afraid that if I don't do it, I'm going to be fired. Or worse for somebody like me, I'm not going to do it and then people will be mad at me, you know. That's not good. So we'll write that. And then, so let's get into the third column. So the third column, what we're going to look at is how has self-reliance failed me in terms of not meeting this deadline? And I don't know about anyone else, but I will get into procrastination. Now, what we're not going to use is we're not going to use the word lazy. And this is a hill that I die on. It's one of those hills that doesn't come up that often. But I don't encourage people to write lazy. Because if I am lazy, there isn't really much of a solution other than don't be lazy. Now, I have worked with so many people, and I don't know too many people that are I don't want to say anyone because I don't like speaking in absolutes, but I don't think people are lazy. But if I get a little bit curious, I can find out what's going on. So one of the things that could be going on is what's known as executive dysfunction. And that's like a cognitive process where I am so overwhelmed with the task, I don't know how to get started. That's what that is. And so on self-reliance, I live with executive dysfunction. And actually in self-reliance, we can say, I think I'm lazy and I shame myself. And guess what is not helpful? Shame. I haven't been able to shame myself into productive action. Full stop. You know what I've been able to shame myself into? A shame spiral. That's what I've been able to successfully shame myself into. Doesn't work. So I live in this executive dysfunction where I'm in this place of overwhelm and I don't know how to get started. Perhaps I operate and I show up to life with perfectionism. It's got to be perfect. Because, why? Because I got to get my value and worth from it. You know? So I show up with perfectionism and that makes it too hard to get started, or I'm restarting, or I'm hyperfixating on certain details that don't matter, again, because I'm perfectionist. Perhaps I experience this thing that I know you guys would never do called, I'm not going to ask for help. I can do it all on myself. I don't want to look weak. Think about that next time you have to take your groceries in and you're like, I'm not doing 2 trips. I'm not judging that. But that sort of, I'm not going to ask for help. I'll do it. I'll take it on. And we see that there's some ego and image maintenance in place with that. Another thing that happens with this fear of not meeting the deadline is I'm somebody that, again, codependent. I need you to like me. And so I don't use often a lot of discernment about what I say yes or no to. And I'm sure there's nobody else here who says yes to too much and is like, uh-oh, that plate, I don't have, and then, you know, when you're already in, my plate is too full, and somebody's like, hey, could you do this? And I'm like, sure. It's like, oh no, why did I do that? So we take on too much. We overwhelm ourselves, holding ourselves to too high or impossible standards. And perhaps we don't communicate with whom this deadline applies. You know what I mean? Perhaps we don't say anything about, hey, I am drowning. We don't ask for an extension. We don't say what's going on. So, God, please remove my fear of not meeting this deadline and direct my attention to what it is you would have me be. And so one of the first things is we're going to, as we work these 12 steps as a way of life, what awakens is, and I can't do it, this is my experience, I couldn't do this any other way. I couldn't self-love myself into self-compassion. I had to take this course of action and receive this unconditional love of God and see your inherent value and worth. But when I did, what cracked open inside of me is that I must be worthy. And what happened, I swear, despite myself, is my internal dialogue got better. I began to be far more gentler to myself, kinder to myself. And that inner monologue. So I treat myself with compassion. And as I sponsor others, I'm not going to be like, hey, you do as you know what I mean? I approach with compassion and curiosity. And the more that I approach these people that I'm trying to help with compassion and curiosity, wouldn't you know it, I start being a little compassionate and curious with myself. And I start to see, okay, why am I stuck? Why am I not getting started? And if it's something like executive dysfunction, what I do is maybe I ask for help. And I practice saying, hey, could somebody just sit with me? You have no idea how helpful it is for a lot of us to just have somebody sitting there as we're doing the thing we need to do. And so we ask for help. And maybe we start small. It's like, okay, I'm just going to do 5 minutes, and we build momentum with it. And if you've ever written inventory, you know you've got that firsthand experience about doing an action you don't want to take that feels overwhelming and building that momentum with it. And if it's something like overwhelm, again, that taking one piece and working on one piece at a time, just as we do one column at a time. Again, these transferable skills in ways that who would have thought, right? We look at, as we grow in developing this way of life, our sense of value and worth in God. We can let go of that need to be perfect. We take the action but leave the results in God's hands because I know my sense of who I am comes from something deeper. I'm rooted in something deeper. And so that's something that begins to happen, and that perfectionism begins to fall away. We're showing up with humility. We begin to have that lens of how can I help? How can I serve, as opposed to how can I get this project done so I look good? We see that orientation, and that orientation helps us to build momentum with it. One of the other things that happens is we practice being honest about what our limitations are. And saying no when we need to say no. And have the humility to say no. Not me, but other people. I'm just kidding. We have that humility to say no when we need to say no. We have that humility to ask for help. We have that humility to delegate when we need to delegate. We get to practice giving people the opportunity, like if it's a teamwork thing, to give to others, to help them take on parts of the project. And perhaps it is that we ask for help. And maybe we communicate with the person. If the deadline, if as we get into the work, we see the deadline isn't something we're not going to be we're not going to be able to make, we communicate early and often and let them know. And then maybe the deadline can be moved. Maybe it's more flexible than we think. But the deeper level is, even if I miss the deadline, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use this experience to help others. And this is one where it's kind of fun to do. Even if I miss the deadline and I'm fired and then also divorced and then also I'm trying to think of all the things that might have like projects and deadlines, and all of it. If I rely on God, I will be okay, and I will use this experience to help others. The next fear that we have is a fear of losing everything. Now, I don't have the full context for this fear, so I'm going to try to hit broad strokes. Again, if I can't remember who specifically gave me this one, so if you're like, it's me, or that person isn't here, that's okay. We're doing it. So that fear of losing everything. Why do I have the fear of losing everything? Oh my gosh, I don't want to lose everything. There's things I like. There's people I like. That would be painful. I've tried to build a life for myself. I'm not going to have control. And then what we look at is how has self-reliance failed me? And when we talk about fear of losing everything, for me, the most obvious connection is when I rely on self, I will relapse. And when I relapse, I will lose everything. And that's reality, for me, relying on self. I'm not going to pray, and I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to work these steps. What will inevitably happen, because I'm an alcoholic and I have alcoholism, is I will relapse. And the result of a relapse is I'm going to lose everything. One of the things that is also going to happen is, and I don't know exactly the context to this, but maybe it ties into finances, so we can pull from some of the other inventory we wrote where it's like, hey, I'm not showing up to work, or I'm underemployed, or I'm spending money, or maybe there's social services I need that I'm not reaching out for, and I'm not getting because I'm overwhelmed, and that's the project deadline. I'm tying it all together. You don't have to tie it all together. Don't worry about that. That's just me. I'm doing my best because I got to kind of put some sort of thing together. So, and I avoid doing those things, avoid asking for help with those things. What happens is, as I rely on self, my relationship with others has a tendency to deteriorate because I'm stepping on their toes, and they don't realize, and I don't realize that I've stepped on their toes. But they're mad at me, and how dare you be mad at me? And I don't make amends, and I don't know how to repair relationships. And I show up to relationships through the lens of what can I get rather than what can I give. And that's painful, and that's difficult. When we talk about that losing everything, I perhaps some of it is there's stuff that's outside of my control, and I'm burning up energy trying to control things that are outside of my control. And just living in that obsession where we're sitting there and just playing the tape of I'm going to lose everything. It's going to be awful. And maybe that's leading to that over-analysis where I can't move, I can't take a step, that sort of thing. And so let's say the prayer, God, please remove my fear of losing everything and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And as I rely on God, I'm going to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. And as a result of that, I am going to stay sober. And as I stay sober, I'm much less likely to lose everything. Like sobriety as a baseline, very helpful for not losing everything. Also, as I continue to work these 12 steps as a way of life, what happens is I continue to pray and I continue to meditate and I show up calmer, patient, with more self-awareness. I take my own inventory, not yours, but I take my inventory. And I do that in step 4. And I share it with somebody in step 5. And I continue that process in step 10 and in step 11. And what happens is I become more aware of where I'm causing harm. And as I practice making amends for the harms that I caused, ultimately that process helps me to repair, to restore, and to continue to replenish the relationships that I have in my life. And as I work with others, that orientation, as I work with others, I get experience helping others, being of service, being kind, being compassionate, letting go of the results. And what happens is as I get my sense of value and worth from God, again, it's what I can give to others. And I'm more likely to have wonderful relationships. I'm more likely to heal relationships that I didn't think could be healed. I'm more likely to repair and restore relationships I didn't think could be repaired and restored. I'm more likely to be able to hold on to these things in my life. But there's a deeper level, and there is the deeper level. I got there. But when we talk about fear of losing everything, in the third column, we can look at, I view the things in my life through the lens of possessiveness. They are mine. Well, in the fourth column, I know it's annoying when I think of something for the third column, but this is how that happens. I think it's something good for the fourth column, and I got to go back to the third. I know! It's just the worst. Just for those that are writing and trying to keep up, I'm so sorry. And Vivian has told me years ago, and like repeatedly, talk slower. And I always forget to do that. So we get what Lynn gave me a reminder today. I'm like, nope, turbo speed. But sorry. Jeez Louise. So what happens is that in that fourth column, the orientation of the things that I have in my life is that they are not mine, that they're God's, and that they're on loan. That it's like life is a blockbuster. You know, I'm renting, I'm not owning. I didn't plan for that to be the metaphor, but that's what this is. I'm renting it. It is on loan. And if I see that it is on loan, that it is not mine, it is God's, that changes the orientation. There's this well-known, maybe it's not that well-known, but there's this sort of like, I'll say parable, like an AA parable. A parable is a story that conveys a deeper meaning. And it's the story of this alcoholic. And there's this alcoholic who's just brutally broken, beaten down by alcoholism. And prays like, man, if there is a God, if there is any sort of higher power, you know, please get me sober. I'll do anything. And then a little like a genie, because that's the visual I have in my mind. God goes poof. And it's like, what's up? Absolutely, your wish is granted. And he's like, amazing. And he's struck sober. And God says, all right, but what I'm going to need is what do you got in your wallet? And the guy's like, whoa, okay, well, hold on. And he opens up his wallet. He's like, listen, I can't give you this money. I need that. Like, I got to pay for gas. And God's like, oh, you have a car. Oh, I will be taking that too. And he's like, whoa, God, whoa, you can't take my car. I need that. I got to go to work. And God's like, oh, you got a job. How wonderful. I'll take that too. And he's like, the drunk is like, no, God, you can't take my job. Like I've got a family. You know, how am I going to support my family? I got a wife, I got kids, I got a house. You know, it's like, I can't. It's like, oh, God's like, how wonderful, wife, kids, and a house. I will be taking those. And what happens is he's left with nothing, but he's sober. And God says, you now work for me, and I'm going to give you this money back, but I need you to remember that it is not your money, and how you use that money, you're using it for me. And I'm going to give you back your car, but I want you to remember it is not your car, it is my car. And you need to be using it for me, to serve me. And I'm going to give you back your job, and I want you to know it is not your job. When you show up to work, who do you work for? You work for me. And you are in service of me. And when you go home to your family, that is not your house, that is my house, and I need you to treat it that way. That is not your husband, your wife, your spouse, that is my spouse, and I need you to treat them that way. And those are not your kids, those are my kids, and I need you to treat them that way. And when I show up to my life in that way, I realize that it is not mine. And as a result, it is not mine to lose. Now, the deeper level is, even if I lose everything, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. And that is real. And so we have we have 2 prompts that are in the chat. One of the prompts that is in the chat is losing my dad. So fear of a parent, fear of a loved one dying and being alone. So column 1 is, why do I have this fear? Because that would be awful. We love our parents, or we love the people in our life that we're afraid that they're going to pass away. Why do I have this fear? Because it would be painful. It would be hard. I don't know what I'm going to do without them. Grief can be just so devastating. And so then let's have a look at column 3. Well, on self-reliance, I'm going to be drinking. And I'm drunk. And what's the sort of relationship that I have with the people that I love? Well, they're probably not in my life. And if they are in my life, I'm straining that relationship. I'm hurt, like I am, using, abusing, I'm harming them. I'm harming them. Even if I'm just gone and off there drinking by myself, I'm harming them because they don't want me to harm me. And on self-reliance, I'm not making amends. I'm not repairing the relationship. I'm not restoring the relationship. I'm not rebuilding that relationship. My orientation is about what I can get rather than give. And please know that I know that anticipatory grief is awful. But what happens is I will live in that anticipatory grief, and I will live alone in it. And I will isolate, and I will let those thoughts go on a little loop. And what's it going to be? What's it going to be? What's it going to be? And that loop of fear is going to go and go and go. And I'm going to be wrapped up in this cocoon of it is me. And I'll just share something. This is about grief in sort of totality. But it's as applicable with anticipatory grief. And we'll talk about it in the 4th column. But I just want to mention it now because I don't have a very good attention span and I don't want to forget. One of the symptoms of grief is a sense of terrible isolation, a sense of I am so alone in this. And that is a symptom of grief. Now I'm going to put a pin in that so we get to that 4th column. And so we're not going to be showing up to our relationships the best version of ourselves. We're going to, what can I get? We're going to be stepping on their toes, and maybe we're avoiding spending time with them because it's like, no, I want to do my things, and we're avoiding. And I know this isn't necessarily about this, but sometimes it can also be hard when it's like we have a difficult relationship. So I also want to include this fear of a loved one dying that I have a difficult relationship with. And so with those difficult relationships, that anticipatory grief is real. But what's going to happen is similar to, and again, I don't mean to tie it in, but similar to the second fear that we had a look at. I'm going to avoid the communication, or I'm going to have this black and white all or nothing with it. So let's say it's somebody that's like, not always the nicest, or somebody that's like hits at these old wounds that have been difficult to heal. And so I'm going to avoid them, or it's going to be an onslaught of like, oh, stop hitting me right in the childhood trauma. You know what I mean? That all or nothing with it, which creates more distance. And sometimes, hey man, we are overwhelming ourselves and contorting ourselves, and then that leads us to be resentful, and we're resentful and don't want to spend time. And so those are just some examples. If it's if it fits, I'm trying to hit broad strokes for people. And so we say, God, please remove the fear of losing a father, losing a loved one, and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And in the 4th column, well, the 4th column is I'm going to be sober. I'm going to be sober because I'm going to work these 12 steps as a way of life. Like my life depends on it because it does. And I'm going to go after that. And I am going to go after that. And as a result of this course of action, I'm going to awaken to the best version of myself. Still imperfect, and just for me, not for anyone else. Deeply flawed and frequently wrong. But you guys are not like that. You're perfect. But little Miss Wrongy Pants over here. But we get to show up as the very best version of ourselves. And we get to pray. We get to meditate, and that gives us this window where we have far more patience, far more tolerance, far more love. And I talk about that. We have prayers in the book where it's like, I am praying to be the channel of thy peace, and that unconditional love, patience, and tolerance goes through me. Like I tap into this unconditional love that I get to channel to those around me. I get to continue to take inventory. And as I take inventory, I see where I've been short, I see where I've been wrong, I see where I've been demanding, I see where maybe I haven't been honest, and I begin to grow and amend and change, and I begin to deepen the repair. So we make our amends with our loved ones. But that amend is vital and it is important, and we continue to demonstrate and grow and change and rebuild and repair and restore. We actively and intentionally seek our sense of value and worth from God, and we channel that to others. And so we're bringing that, what can I give? How can I support? How can I help? And let's be real, sometimes there are those childhood wounds, and we continue to inventory those, and sometimes we need some outside help with those, and that help, and we do that too. And we show up the best version of ourselves. But we don't show up with black and white. We show up honest about what our limitations are. We communicate early and often. And so if there's boundaries that we need to set about, hey, I can come over, but I can't be there all day. Do you know what I mean? We set those boundaries about what our limitations are so we're not burnt out, run down. And so the time is precious. And we're fully present for that time and fully there. And, there's a gentleman, I love like spiritual stuff. And I do a lot of my different little spiritual tangents. And there's this gentleman, he wrote this book and he spoke about his parents dying. And it really struck me. And he spoke about how when his parents passed away, he was able to be okay. And I was like, that's wild. But the reason he was able to be okay was because he felt he had fully loved and fully appreciated them and the time they had together. And I think there's something really there. And so we get to show up and fully appreciate and be present to and really those precious moments. And then I was talking earlier about that anticipatory grief and that sense of isolation. And so what are we going to do? We're going to continue to inventory that. We're going to continue to be honest about that. And some of the other fears that we're going to have around that, we're going to take through inventory. But here's something else. Grief is a part of the human condition. We all know people who have lost people. We all know people who are grieving. And so what we're going to do, we know that grief is isolating. So we are going to be active and intentional about reaching out to people who are grieving. Because a lot of times we have this anxiety, and not us as alcoholics, I think us as in human beings, at least in Western culture, because that's what I can speak to. We have this fear about, I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to bug them. And it's or hey, let me know if you need anything. Yeah, that doesn't work. So what we're going to do is we're going to practice reaching out to people. Hey, I just want you to know I was thinking about you. I'm sending love. There's no pressure to respond. I'm just giving you that because there's no pressure to respond. So helpful. So helpful. Because I'm afraid I'm going to be a burden. And in the first little bit of grief, sometimes there can be an overwhelm of messages. And so we're just going to say, you don't need to respond. And instead of, what can I do to help? We're going to offer, hey, what we can do. Hey, let me know if you'd like, I can Uber Eats you a meal. Let me know if I can come over and sit with you. Let me know if you want me to take you shopping. Offer these, hey, can I come over and do your laundry? Can I come over and clean? Depends on what the relationship is, but offer these tangible things that we can do to help these people directly so that they can say, yeah, okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to enter into that place of the other person's grief. And we're going to, not to use but we're going to hold space for their grief. and we're going to be compassionate. And what's going to happen is we do that, this grief goes from this isolating thing, and it always feels that way, but it helps it to be something that is more communal, and it awakens our compassion and empathy for others. And I think God lives there. I think God lives in those moments, and so we're gonna do that, and that's gonna change how we show up to others. That's how we change how we show up to grief, and we're gonna continue to move through this way of life. And guess what? We're gonna, as we continue to move through this way of life, hopefully we're gonna build and cultivate a support system that will be there to support us. Those sponsor pillars, friends that are there, and so we're not going through it alone. And the deeper level is even if or even when we lose a loved one, if we rely on God, we will be okay, and we will use this experience to help others. And I know it's annoying that I always think of something extra after I said the last thing. I know. But on column 3, I got ego and image maintenance. I want to pretend everything's okay. And I want to hold all the things that I like, hey, I got to do this. I got to be productive. I got a deadline, and I want to present, I am okay. Well, in the 4th column, I don't need to have ego and image maintenance. I have practice with authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability. And as I do that allows me to, again, have that deeper experience and let people in, let people help me. Now, we're at the time. We do have one more fear in the chat, so I could either do it or I can stop. Go? Okay, cool. Yeah, no problem. So the fear is fear of physical harm due to a transgression against a jealous person. So this fear that I'm going to be hurt because somebody is jealous. Column 2, why do I have this fear? I don't want to be hurt. That sucks. I don't want that. Column 2, because it's painful. Because I feel like I have to be on guard. That sort of thing. And I don't want to live in that uncertainty. Well, so column 3, how has self-reliance failed me? Well, I'll let you know, self-reliance fails me when I am active in my alcoholism. I'm not always hanging around people that are well. I'm finding companions that are, I'm lowering my standards below the people that I'm able to find. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not hanging out with people who are happy and well, emotionally regulated and part of the, conflict resolution skills and, that sort of stuff. I'm hanging around people that are not well because I am not well. And one of the things is, when we're active in our alcoholism, we often engage in some of those behaviors. And as we engage with some of those behaviors, that escalates things. On self-reliance, I also can either be somebody that's either avoidant, but I have a feeling in this this jealous retribution, it could be more like... I'm escalating rather than de-escalating, where I'm like, I need to be right and I'm going to blow this whole situation up. When I think about the jealous transgressions and stuff, what's coming, this might not be what was meant or might not be applicable, but what was coming to mind to me is those sort of jealous lover sort of situations. So on self-reliance, guess what? I don't have a sex ideal. And I'm sure as heck not living up to it. And I'm engaged. I know, not you guys. You guys are just so well behaved all the time. But I'm not living up to it. And hey, I'm engaging in maybe relationships where I'm crossing boundaries that I shouldn't be crossing and doing things that I shouldn't be doing. And as a result, people are getting hurt and people are getting jealous, and that there's that sort of escalation of things. On self-reliance, I don't inventory my behavior. On self-reliance, I don't make amends where I have caused harm. On self-reliance, I don't communicate boundaries, which is honoring what my limitations are. I don't communicate hardly at all. Or I over-communicate, need to be right, try to dominate, play God, either side of that sort of spectrum. And maybe it's one of those things where, hey, I'm going off as broad strokes as I can. Hey, maybe I'm not asking for help. Maybe this is something, if somebody is physically threatening me, actually this is, I'm going way over, I apologize. I had a situation, I had broken up with my ex. We'd been broken up for a very long time. I think, was it 10 years? I think we'd been, maybe, no, I don't know. No, not, we had been broken up, let's say between 5 and 10. And we had not spoken to each other. Anywho, he calls up the house. Lovely that he still has the number. And this whole dramatic situation where his current girlfriend, he had stolen some money and was like, Paige, you need to pay it. I'm like, I have nothing to do with this. And he threatened, which I will just say, wild. Listen, I know how to pick them. And I want to say, we had been broken up for a long time. It's not like, and I was sober. And he's like, and then we're gonna, and to be fair, it was mostly her, but the drunker he got, the more he was in the plan, she called me a not nice name and he was like, yeah, not nice name, the drunker he got. It was, anywho, so I had to get the police involved. And on self-reliance, I won't do that. On self-reliance, I will avoid asking for help. I will, or I'm in a situation where I'm living my life where I can't get some outside help involved. You know what I'm saying? I will find, just if you're wondering, at least where I live, you can't get a restraining order from somebody that has no fixed address because they have to serve them. So I didn't get a restraining order. I ran into him out front of a Walmart one time. He was drinking. He's like, Paige. And I'm like, you threatened me. And he's like, no, I didn't. He's a character. Sorry, now I'm devolving into stories about my ex, which I will refrain from. So, God, please remove my fear of physical harm as the result of a jealous person and direct my attention to what you would have me be. Well, as I rely on God, I'm going to stay sober. Because I'm working these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. And as a result, I'm growing into a healthier person. And I'm attracting healthier people that are not so much prone to resort to violence for conflict resolution. You know what I mean? And guess what? I'm cleaning up the past. I'm making amends where I've caused harm. And I'm beginning to bring myself into the present. Through this work, I cultivate a sane, sound ideal for my future sex life. I make amends where I've caused harm, unless to do so would cause harm to others. And I take that sex ideal to prayer and to meditation. And that allows me to grow and to deepen that experience and to live up to that ideal. And if this is an area that's really tricky, I throw myself into sponsoring people that like where it's, platonic. I just thought I would add that just in case. Throw myself into sponsoring others, working with others. And as a result, that area of my life begins to heal. If I'm at a place where I need help, I reach for help. I ask for help. And the deeper level is even if, and I know it might feel extreme, even if there's physical violence, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. And I pushed it for longer than I should. So over to you, Vivian.